2 polarizing writers, 3 comic book series, and a truckload of literary criticism, and a universe of cosmic horror. Sometimes the creations of certain writers are better handled by other writers. This is our look at Alan Moore's Lovecraft Trilogy.
In his house at Relay, dead Cthulhu lies dreaming.
Here we go!
This episode is about Alan Moore's Lovecraft Trilogy. It's 3 limited series that are interrelated and interconnected with each other, exploring the fictions and the themes behind the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. For those of you watching who don't know who H.P. Lovecraft is, Lovecraft was a science fiction and horror writer who published a highly regarded body of fiction, both science fiction and horror, during the early decades of the 20th century. He was born on August 20th, 1890. He was from a family of fallen aristocrats. The family had fallen on really hard times when he was
racist.
young. Oh, he was a terrible racist. Yeah. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. He lived almost his entire life in Providence, Rhode Island. He basically created the subgenre of cosmic horror.
People might know him from that HBO series that was on recently.
Oh yeah, Lovecraft Country.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, they reference a lot of his work.
That's what that's about.
Right. Like I said, he lived most of his life in Providence, Rhode Island, except for a brief time when he was married to a woman named Sonia Green when he lived in Red Hook, Brooklyn. That does connect to what we're going to talk about. That's not just a little bit of trivia.
Brooklyn!
His type of horror positions humanity as an insignificant and highly vulnerable group of beings that are constantly threatened by vast alien entities from beyond our reality. Arguably, his most famous story is Call of Cthulhu, which was published in 1928, wherein not only does he create his most famous monster, Cthulhu, but also he takes all the themes that had appeared earlier in his fiction and kind of synthesizes them into one story. So if you really want an idea of what Lovecraft's work is like, Call of Cthulhu is a good place to start.
Now, when did you know about Cthulhu?
I started reading Lovecraft when I was in high school. I was probably about 15.
Because in the recent years, Cthulhu has become very popular.
For some reason, something
I
about
don't understand why in recent years Cthulhu
I don't know.
I'm not a Lovecraft fan, and I don't really know much about Lovecraft. But in the last couple years, like Cthulhu, I had no idea where he was from.
Yeah.
He's everywhere. Well, Funko Pop. They make
a lot of
everything
people.
of Cthulhu now.
A lot of people were influenced by Lovecraft's work, like Mike Mignola.
Right.
So like the ancient ones in Hellboy are very much Lovecraftian.
Is anybody allowed to
monsters.
use Cthulhu right now?
There was never any copyright on any of Lovecraft's work because he wanted other people to use his stuff.
So
to
other
spread
people
his ideas.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that because it's amazing how much I see Cthulhu, and I actually feel as a collector and as knowledgeable of pop culture stuff that I don't know about Cthulhu, and he just keeps popping. I'm like, why is this character who I don't know from anything popping up everywhere?
There's an argument that could be made that he's kind of the first kaiju in popular culture.
Definitely the way he looks, he could be. But I honestly know very little about him. Just that he's popular as hell right now, and he's all over the place.
Right.
And I don't know why.
Some of the ideas from Lovecraft's fiction, especially Call of Cthulhu, show up in King Kong. Because Call of Cthulhu is published in 1928. Kong comes out, 1931?
Yeah.
And so they kind of fell back on some of ideas about, like, being lost in the Great Sea.
So his influence is almost 100 years of influence on
nearly
science fiction. I know he's a big science fiction influence, but I really didn't know about Cthulhu. I didn't know how big of a racist he was until recently.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. Lovecraft basically retired from writing after the suicide of one of his closest correspondents and fans, Robert E. Howard, who created Conan the Barbarian. And then he died of intestinal cancer about a year later on March 15th, 1937. During his lifetime, Lovecraft never achieved any fame or fortune related to his stories, but like I just said, he never copyrighted anything intentionally. He wanted other people to take his ideas and use them in their own way. Really, one of the biggest people responsible for spreading Lovecraft all over the place after he died was August Derleth, who was a publisher and really big fan, and kind of took his writings and parceled it out to other people, and who also wrote Cthulhu and Lovecraftian stories on his own. Why was Lovecraft polarizing? Well, like Chad already mentioned, he was a racist. He later in life, near the end of his life, kind of took back a lot of things he had said as far as racism goes. He kind of felt bad about it. He lived a very sheltered existence. He had never really met black people before he even said bad things about them. It doesn't excuse who he was, because honestly, I think if I had ever known him, I probably wouldn't have liked him as a person. I do enjoy his stories. His stories have very little indication of racism in them. Most of the racism came from essays and poetry that he wrote. So again, the other reason he's polarizing is not everyone can like or enjoy Lovecraft's work. He tends to be very wordy. Some of his stuff is very slow. He writes in a really anachronistic style, almost like he's imitating Edgar Allan Poe when he was writing he's writing in the 20s and Poe was writing in the 1840s, So there's not a lot of, he just was an unusual guy, and a lot of that shows through in the work. On the other hand, we have the other writer that we're talking about, which is Alan Moore. Alan Moore has achieved a great deal of fame and fortune in his career. He's a writer of comic books and prose. He was born on November 18th, 1953 in Northampton, England, where he has always and still lives. His start in the British sci-fi and comic fanzines in the 1970s, and then moved into writing comic book scripts for Warrior Magazine in 2000 AD.
What's Warrior Magazine?
Warrior was like this British published, really fan-run magazine that published a lot of early, specifically British writers and artists.
And 2000 AD is where we get
Judge Dredd.
It's a very famous,
oh my God, so many characters.
UK comic from the 70s, 80s, even to today. It's still 2000 AD is still being published today, right?
Not to go on too much of a tangent. What happened was all of Marvel's stuff made it to England throughout the 60s,
right?
And they loved it. British sci-fi and comic fans really loved Marvel stuff, but they wanted something particularly
their
British.
own.
Yeah, so they started creating a lot of fanzines in the 70s. Warrior Magazine got up and running. There's another writer named Steve Moore, who was a close friend of Alan Moore, who really helped a lot of this get off the ground too. But that's a whole other history.
2000 AD is also a magazine, right?
It's
more magazine-y, so it wasn't...
I think Warrior was too.
UK wasn't really publishing comic books. They would get in DC and Marvel Comics, printed with the special pence on there. You've seen that in other videos that we've had.
Right.
And they made magazines.
Yeah. And you know what started in Warrior was V for Vendetta.
Oh, really?
It started as a feature there.
Some people might know that movie.
Right. Moore was part of the British, quote-unquote, British invasion of the 1980s, when lots and lots of British comic writers and artists made their way into American comics, mostly through DC. The first thing he did was he took Swamp Thing, which was basically a run-of-the-mill creature feature at the time.
Not popular at all.
No. And he revolutionized it into a complex commentary about love and death and nature and humanity's relationship with nature. And then after revolutionizing Swamp Thing...
His Swamp Things are some of the best written comic books ever written.
And the illustrations by John Toddleman.
If you haven't read Swamp Thing from that time frame when Alan was writing it, the writing is really not even remotely close to what other comic books are. It blows comic books out of the water. It's really, really, really in-depth.
And after revolutionizing Swamp Thing, he basically revolutionized the entire comic book industry with Watchmen.
100%.
A 12-issue limited series that is often...
DC Comics.
From DC. It was right after DC purchased the Carlton characters. And he took the Carlton characters, rewrote them as new characters, and created this commentary.
Carlton characters are Blue Beetle, Peacemaker.
Right. The Question. So there's a bunch of DC characters who you know and love today who were originally Carlton characters that they purchased. Alan Moore takes them and kind of molds them into the characters he different
needs
shapes
for them, but they still resemble them.
Yeah, because I think the editor-in-chief at the time, I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it Schwartz? Julia Schwartz?
It's probably towards the end of her run.
Yeah, but he created he changed the Carlton character so that he could kill people off if he needed to for the purpose of the story.
And it wouldn't impact the
it wouldn't really
DC
impact
universe.
the DC universe.
He's not going to kill Blue Beetle right after they purchased the rights to Blue Beetle.
No, you can't do that. But he used Watchmen to examine the intricate ethics of what a world with superheroes would be like. I mean, how difficult it would be to really exist in a world with people who were masked vigilantes
Did you read it when
or genuine superhumans. I read it a couple of years after it came out.
Because when I was
collecting.
Huge collecting. I still collect huge now, but huge collecting. And it was so groundbreaking to see the dirty side of superheroes.
Right, yeah. And really that idea of if they were real, maybe it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing.
They wouldn't necessarily be nice.
It wouldn't be a good thing. throughout his very difficult to summarize career, more recently retired to just focus writing on...
grow a beard?
Well, to further grow that beard.
He's got a great beard, Alan Moore.
That beard is beautiful. Oh, is it beautiful?
It's a work of art.
My God. I want to touch it.
It's a work of art, Alan Moore did.
Yeah. He recently, like I said, he recently retired from comics amid a lot of grumbling about the comics industry and movies in general, in order to focus just on writing novels and essays and some other performance pieces that he does with his magic and his occult studies and all that other stuff. He's pretty polarizing because he has said some very, very mean things about superheroes. Basically, he says that far too much devotion to superheroes could lead someone to becoming a fascist. Which that's his argument from his point of view. And again, a lot of people are upset. There's a lot of stuff he's right about when it comes to the comic industry, mostly saying that for a very long time it was run the same way a crime family syndicate would have been run.
Yeah, there was a lot of heavy hands that made all the money and paid the writers and the artists nothing, and they had no ownership rights.
Right. And no matter how you feel about what Moore has said or his writing, there's no denying that he pushed comics into a more sophisticated form of storytelling. And one of the series that I'm going to talk about coming up is definitely one of those places where he pushed the medium forward, for sure. Moore's always discussed in interviews his admiration for the creations of Lovecraft, not necessarily the guy himself, but for his creations. And this kind of led to partially the existence of this trilogy. The Lovecraft trilogy is really comprised of 3 separate but closely related limited series. The first is the Courtyard, the second is called the Neonomicon, and the third is Providence. All 3 series were illustrated by Jason Burrows, which his art is really,
I don't know.
really cool. It looks like, do you know, I'm blanking on the name of the guy who illustrated Preacher.
I don't know that either.
Steve, I can't remember his name. But it's very cool. It's very good stuff. So just to break it down, the series itself, The Courtyard is a 2-issue limited series published in 2003. Oh, sorry. All 3 series were published by Avatar Press. They're all indies. And I like what Avatar does. Avatar kind of gives some space for established creators to do stuff that other big guys won't let them do.
Doesn't matter if they sell it on it's the art.
Yeah, like Warren Ellis did some real cool stuff for Avatar. Again, Courtyard is a 2-issue limited series published in 2003. It was actually adapted from a short story that Alan Moore wrote. The script was written by Anthony Johnson, and it's the only part that's not directly scripted by Moore. It follows an FBI agent named Aldo Sachs, who traces the center of a series of ritualistic murders to Red Hook, Brooklyn, where he meets a guy named Johnny Carcosa, who basically introduces him to an alien language of the old ones that drives him insane and causes him to commit murders in the same style of the murders he's been investigating. The second series, Neonomicon, was a 4-issue limited series that was published in 2010. This was the first time that Moore got it directly with scripting the trilogy. It follows 2 FBI agents following up on Aldo Sachs' investigation, which takes them to Salem, Massachusetts from Red Hook, where they get involved in a cult and they fall afoul of some pretty dark stuff. This would probably be an excellent time to remind everyone that all 3 of these series are for mature readers only. They should not be read by children.
Not for kids?
No. There's something that happens in the Neonomicon series that is absolutely horrific.
You've read them or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. The Neonomicon and the next one take it pretty far. And basically the cult that they run afoul of is attempting to incarnate Cthulhu.
Okay, so this is about Cthulhu.
They kind of leading to him, right? The third series, Providence, is a real mind bender. It took me a few weeks to make my way through it, and not because it's necessarily a big series, though it is, but it's really complicated. And it's a 12-issue limited series. It was published from 2015 to 2017. The story follows the investigations into the occult by a journalist named Robert Black, who works for the New York Herald in 1919. As he travels through New England following various threads, basically he's looking for a book that very much mirrors the Necronomicon in Lovecraft's books, he kind of runs into the source material for all of Lovecraft's stories. So he finds himself in the Dunwich Horror, meeting the goat boy who's born of a woman. It's all these weird stuff going on. And the thing is, Black doesn't realize that he's actually the center of the stories that he's been investigating. People keep saying to him, "Oh, you're the Herald," and he thinks they're referring to the paper he works for. They're not. It's something else. These are really complex stories. And this is one of the reasons I really, really like them. They're very, very difficult to get through if you don't know Lovecraft. But with a little internet searching here and there, if you like a rabbit hole, it's a fun thing to go through, especially Providence. Providence is very complicated. And that's the one where I think Moore is kind of pushing forward what comics can do.
Have they ever talked about making these into movies?
I don't see how they could.
Oh, okay.
There's something that happens in Neonomicon, and I don't want to give too much away, that they would never allow to happen in a movie. Well, maybe they would, considering there's a scene in an old horror movie that I remember that was similar, where a woman is attacked by a giant
I know Moore
worm.
doesn't like when they convert the comics to
he hates
movies.
it.
I know it's a big thing with The Watchmen.
His view is movies should be movies, comics should be comics. Leave them alone. Don't mix them. Right. There's no reason to take this and adapt it to that. And I understand why. I mean, every time, The Watchmen was a fairly decent movie, but it was nowhere near as good as the series.
Oh, absolutely nowhere near as good as the series.
And the adaptation of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was a disaster.
Oh, I hated it.
The comics are unbelievably wonderful, and the
movie was
just
what it was.
Dreadful. Just absolutely. I thought it was dreadful. I hated every minute of it. Moore is a better writer than Lovecraft. And that's a good thing for people who like Lovecraft's ideas.
And he's not a racist.
True, yeah, and he's not a racist. Moore takes Lovecraft's ideas, like a lot of adapters did with Lovecraft, and does better things than Lovecraft would have done with them. It's just a fun read, especially if you like cosmic horror. It's very, very, very interesting. And it's one of those things where, do you ever read something and it makes you feel somewhat paranoid for a temporary period of time after you read it? That's what these series are like.
You actually worry about what you're reading.
You put them down and you feel like you're surrounded by...
This could actually happen. Oh my God.
Even though you know this can't happen.
Right, this could happen.
You feel like you're surrounded by big, invisible things when you're finished. And it just...
You start seeing what you read. Yeah, of course.
Right. So again, why is this important? I think it's important because Providence, the third part of the series, is another one of those moments, and maybe the last moment, because Moore is now retired, where we're going to get someone like Alan Moore.
Is that his last published work?
I don't know if it's his last published comic work, but he's done now.
Right.
And I think this could be one of the last things that he puts out there that pushes the form forward. And I love comics, and I want to see comics always be better.
He's in his 70s now, right?
He's 70.
Yeah.
I believe he's 70 or 71 now. Yeah. Yeah, and he's busy as ever, but just
he's writing novels,
short stories. His novels are really complex. Oh my God!
I know you. I always see you with one in your hand.
Oh my God, they're very complex. So yeah, if you like Lovecraft and his ideas, and you like Alan Moore, this is a perfect union for things for you to read. It's really fun. It's really interesting. And Providence, if you like rabbit holes and you like complicated stuff, if you enjoyed League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you will really enjoy. Not the movie. If you like the comic.
Or The Watchmen.
Yeah, or The Watchmen. You will really like Providence. So that's all I got. Get out there. Read some more.
Subscribe if you like what we're saying here. We're two of the hardest working men on YouTube. Put out more videos than most.
I'm sweating like crazy right now.
We put out more videos than most of the YouTube channels. And as we like to say here when we end every single episode,
collect what you love.
Love what you collect. We'll see you next time.
See you later.